Oh, yeah.
Oh, dear. Because they'll be like, Mom, you said we were doing this, and now.
The time is 9 o'clock, and you're listening to 106.1 FM WSCA, Portsmouth Community Radio, 106.1 FM. On the internets at www.wscafm.org. At the top of the hour, we always give you a weather report. What is that, Dan? I didn't hear you.
Whether you like it or not.
That's correct. Today will be sunny with a high near 74, northwest wind around 10 miles per hour. Tonight will be mostly clear with low around 52, west wind around 5 miles per hour, becoming calm. Wednesday is sunny with a high near 77, calm wind becoming south around 5 miles per hour in the afternoon. Wednesday night clear with low around 55, south wind around 5 miles per hour, becoming calm in the evening. Thursday will be sunny with a high near 77. That's the atomic number of iridium. Calm wind becoming southeast around 5 miles per hour in the afternoon. Thursday night mostly clear around 56. Friday mostly sunny with a high near 74. Friday night partly cloudy with low around 59. And Saturday, a 30% chance of showers after 2 p.m. Something off the community calendar, Vintage and Vine at Strawberry Bank Museum, 14 Hancock Street, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Thursday, September 12th, 2024, 5 to 7:30 p.m. More event details, including a link to purchase tickets, may be found by going to www.strawberrybank.org/vintage-vine. The time is 9:01, and it's time for Round the Square. Round the Square is a weekly talk show hosted by Dan Freund. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Freund.
Hello again. I'm Dan Freund. I'm your host here. So we have a very special guest with us this week.
We have two special guests in the studio right now.
We have two special guests, in fact, yes. Rochelle Jones is joining us today. Phil is taking a picture. You can't see that on the radio, but you can see it on the live stream.
Oh, live streaming. Hi.
If you are tuning into my YouTube channel, which, incidentally, if you are interested in finding me online, you can find me at myfrienddan.com. You can find me on all the social networks as @myfrienddan. Isn't that right, Phil?
That is absolutely 100% correct.
So, Phil, we have our guest here. How would you introduce Rochelle if you were to introduce her to our listening audience?
I would do it like this.
Oh yeah, I like it. You guys are amazing.
I don't know if you were expecting your own theme song today, but there you go. You got your theme song.
Usually if I do, it's like I'm making up myself as I'm leaving the house, you know?
Yeah. And you brought a guest today, is that correct?
I did. I brought my partner, Mason, the comfort dog.
Okay, so if people didn't understand the lyrics to that song, tell people who you are, what Mason does, and why you are partnered with Mason.
Who I am. So at the police department, I am a detective, but I'm the community outreach coordinator, like you so creatively pointed out, with all your talents. And I'm also, just in the past year, became Mason the comfort dog's handler. So what that means is my main responsibilities are building and maintaining relationships with the public and, helping just have those positive experiences or educational experiences for people about what law enforcement does, being that bridge between the community and law enforcement. And Mason also helps with that in so many different ways. So he is our first comfort dog for the Portsmouth Police Department.
That's great. And so your duties, you're spread between community outreach.
I have a lot of duties.
Yeah, you do. Like we look at your dossier and it's like she does this and this and this. It's like, when do you have time for just you?
Yeah.
You also said, well, for the police department I am. So what do you do for just you?
Yeah, so I don't know if you noticed, but I have a brace on right now. So Dan kind of knows that one of my favorite passions is playing softball. So slow pitch softball is one of my passions.
A teammate with my girlfriend.
That's
Shout
right.
out to you, Tracy,
Your lovely girlfriend. She's so sweet. I think she loves my bat, and I felt bad I wasn't there for the rest of the year. But I tore my ACL and meniscus, so life slows you down sometimes, because I think that's just not going to happen otherwise.
But it wasn't work related, right?
No, this time it wasn't. Yeah, and last time actually I did it the same thing to my other knee like 6 years ago. So it's not my first rodeo. But no, not work related. It was just family gathering related. So, but you know, like playing softball, things like that. But I'm pretty normal. I like to read. I love dancing. I wanted to be a hip hop dancer growing up. Like that was a huge passion. We used to come actually hang out in this station, radio station too, like Bruce and, you know, just some old school like Portsmouth, you know, Elvis Room, coffee house, you name it.
So did you grow up here then?
I did. I was born and raised here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually live in the neighborhood still that I was born and raised in. So it used to be Seacrest Village, Mariners Village. And now it's Ospey Landing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we came out this morning actually and saw two of our sheriff's friends. They were unfortunately had to go and evict somebody, so we got slowed down a little bit. It was like, oh hey, which is just kind of funny. Like that's your life. That, you know, a lot of people are obviously like apprehensive sometimes when they see a police officer, right? And then here I am like, oh, do I know them? And like kind of like running up to the car safely. And then with Mason, obviously, it's always like, oh my God, Mason. So things like that.
Well, he's there to do a job. And that's to comfort.
He is, yeah. And movies, things like movies, we were just talking about a couple shows that...
that help distract from the reels of reality.
Yes, I am probably one of the least cop watching shows or reality cop. Like I'm so into dragons and like House of Dragons, Game of Thrones, and Lord of the Rings series and magic. You know, right now I'm watching Discovery of Witches. Like I love that. I've been waiting for that one to be free on Netflix instead of having to stream another site. So, and then, you know, doing anything, you know, I like to try new things too. We just went to the fair, so we went to Hopkinton Fair for the first time.
Okay.
And it's funny because my friend and I are walking around. There's these dudes with like "I love hot moms" shirt. I'm like, we need the "I love hot mom" shirts.
Oh yeah, totally.
So I found a couple online. So I don't know. We're gonna hand them out the next time we see somebody with one of those shirts and say switch it out.
Oh, that's great.
Several folks from the community here are originally from Hopkinton.
Oh really? Okay. Yeah.
Monty Bohannon.
Wow. Yeah, I know Monty. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah,
He's,
works for the city now.
His family farm is out there.
Oh, okay.
They run a large dairy farm.
Very awesome. Yeah, so I love
Yeah, I
California.
haven't been out to the fair. How was it?
It was good. Yeah, it was a good size. Like it was neat because they had like a beer tent that just kind of contained anybody that was drinking. And then we got to see something that I'll have to ask permission for, but they have dock diving. Like they have all the dogs. Yeah, they come here. I'm talking about you. You're a dog. Come here. Yeah, they do this dock diving. So they take like, you know, anybody can join this club, and they have like set up like these portable docks with big pools. And you take your dog and you just throw the toy out there, and the dog runs as fast as it can. It's almost like a long jump for dogs.
Yeah, they do some kind of those at KTP.
Yes.
Over at
yeah. And I was like, oh, I know who would be awesome at that.
That's awesome. So I assume with Mason being a comfort dog, that job is 24 hours.
Yeah, so
that's not really like I can clock out and not take care of the comfort dog.
Yeah, and also I think that's similar to my position as well. Like I'm never, you know, ever really feel off duty. Like I might get a late night, you know, things come to me in many different ways. So it could be an email or Facebook message, or you go to the grocery store and somebody's like, hey, can I ask you a question? So I kind of joke that whenever I step out of my house, like my time is not my own, but now it's like even the same with social media, which for me is, you know, it's not a complaint by any means, because I feel like we're winning, you know, it's like that's a win if somebody feels comfortable asking and trusting you with it, you know.
By far.
And it's hard to tell when you're, it may not be a time where you're on duty in uniform that you want to draw that attention to yourself. So, you know, I'm always happy to help, because if that was me and I didn't do what I do, then I would want to have that friend that I
you put yourself out there too.
Yes.
I mean, this is the community you grew up in.
Yes.
This is the community where you are so heavily involved. And people recognize you.
Yeah, and it's personal, you know, it's like these are people that you have relationships with. They are your friends, they are your family, they are your former teachers, they're the kids you went to school with, they're their kids, you know, so, and whoever else, you know, that you meet, and then that just is a ripple effect. So a lot of times somebody just reached out to me, they thought their daughter was being stalked, and sent me an email, and they said, you know, I don't know you, but, you know, one of my friends knows you, and they said that I should reach out to you. You know, just giving that guidance on what to do and hearing the scenario and breaking that down, so they're not having to sometimes do that cold call where they don't know who they're talking to on the other end. And, you know, that can be a deterrent sometimes. So it's just, and then once they have that positive experience, then that helps them feel more comfortable approaching like the police the next time. And it's not the first time they're meeting an officer, right? It's like when something bad happens. So that's the goal. And Mason, obviously, same thing. So we can't walk through the neighborhood without the kids running up to be like, can I pet Mason? Which I love. You know, that's it. That's what you want, you know. And there are some kids that have been afraid of dogs that have worked through their fear with him as well. And so that's really cute, because that's things like I'll just explain to them, I'll sit him down, I'll lay him down. I mean, he's a jack of all trades. Like, we got really, really lucky with Hero Pups, and he's amazing.
Now,
you know?
how did Mason come? Is he technically owned by the department?
Yes.
And you're his caretaker,
Yep.
handler? How did he come to the department?
So, as part of a wellness, sorry, I'm saying but as part as wellness initiative. So we do different things in the department. Like, there's wellness check-ins where once a year, like, we mandatorily have to check in with the therapist, and just, you know, whether you want to talk or not, it's just things to try and, you know, bring down, reduce, you know, officer suicides or that stress level, and, you know, trying to help us with our work-life balance. And with Mason, the idea was, again, with officer wellness, like helping to boost morale, helping, you know, also with the community, and like things like victim interviews. Like, people will talk to dogs where I'm one of the most outgoing probably police officers, but there's still that barrier of the badge, right? And people will just come up, and he can get to people in communications and relationships that we can't. So there is an organization, Hero Pups, and I think a lot of people see like comfort dog popping up everywhere, right? Oh, Hampton has one, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a comfort dog nowadays.
School has one.
Yeah, right. And there's like Utah is at elementary school. Yeah, at New Franklin, and you kind of, as part of the pack, like you kind of like hear, you know, where all the dogs are now that I'm in this position, when something I normally wouldn't have probably committed to memory, right? So you can do it different ways, but for us, we went through Hero Pups. So they provide emotional support dogs, service dogs, therapy dogs, and comfort dogs to first responders and veterans only. So they only use rescue dogs. They train them for about a year in different environments. So before Mason even came to us, he's been exposed to sirens. He's been in schools. Like, he's been exposed to people who are, you know, using wheelchairs and walkers. And so things where hopefully he's not going to get spooked, right? And they kind of put them through a course to see which dog is going to be better at which position. Yeah. So maybe there's a dog that is a little too curious and may not make a good, you know, service dog or something like that, right? But for him, he's kind of like, they knew that they chose him for us because they knew that he was going to be not just working with police officers, but also with the community. So he's definitely like, he's social, but also there's so much more added on with mental health. So if we have to do a critical incident, we're part of what's called a critical incident stress management team. So like, say for instance, I'm sure a lot of people heard about what happened on the bridge, you know, the other day.
Last week.
Right, and so an officer-involved shooting, or officers that discovered, you know, a deceased 8-year-old. I mean, where does that go with them when they go home with that, as well as like everybody else? You know, the trauma, just hearing about it can be considered secondary trauma. So, you know, having, you know, something like a comfort dog just to be able to pet, and if it's not going to judge you, that, you know, that is not going to tell anybody what you're thinking or feeling, you know, that can be very comforting and distracting in itself. So we're part of the peer support team as well. And one of the things I love about Mason is that, you know, the sky's the limit on how he can be utilized, for lack of a better word, right? So a lot of times in the community, I'll just say, you know, what do you think? You know, let me know what, you know. So it might be like, we're going to a school event, a back to school event. But for him, it's nice because you can have a relationship with him without necessarily having one with me. You know, I can, you know, if somebody, it sounds like they've had a bad day or something, I might be able to be like, hey, can you watch him for a minute? And I can walk off, and they can just have that time, even if it's 45 seconds away from your computer, just petting and spending time with him. It's going to boost like those oxytocins, you know. So that's the goal, one of them.
Oh, that's great. He's a good boy.
He is a sweetheart. Yeah,
doing a good job here.
And it's a lot of training. It's a lot of behind the scenes. Like, luckily, being laid up, like, we can do all these like commands, and I'm teaching him I teach him tricks, like really for mental stimulation, and it helps with kids. So when you kids have to do like say, you know, if there's an allegation of sexual abuse, right? It's like, and a child has to be interviewed. That's so scary. That's so much anxiety. So we can come in. I usually am out of uniform. He's in his little uniform, and you can see where it says like comfort dog and pet me, and his collar says Mason. So I try to answer all the questions. Like, can I pet him? Yes. What's he do? He's a comfort dog. Where does he work? Portsmouth PD. He's got his badge. What's his name? Mason. You know, and I'll have the kids do handler things with him. So that helps, again, like distract them before they might have to talk about something pretty scary. You know. So, but I mean, he's great. And then he just as he grows and gets more mature, he develops his own relationships. He has his favorites, so he'll go at work and he's off leash at work, and he'll walk to certain offices or cubicles, and
I'm sure he knows where he gets the treats.
yeah, we have our social worker.
And also
yes.
where he
well, no, he
needed
doesn't
the
get
most
treats. Yeah,
either.
so he's not allowed to. There's like a whole 10-page policy. It's crazy, but one of the things is we want him affection driven, not food driven. So if somebody's gonna give him a treat, they're supposed to ask permission. Plus, that's good for keeping him fit. And I know, I actually let somebody give him a cookie. We did an event, and I said, okay. And it was like blue. And it's like everything was brown, but all of a sudden it was blue. And I'm like, there's the cookie. But you can tell when he's gotten into something, which really happens. He has very good manners. You know what I mean? So it's just like, great. Again, I want him affection driven and not, but I will give him treats like right now because I'm asking him to do a lot, which is sit there and do nothing.
What was the training for you like before you were partnered with Mason?
Yeah, so usually it's a year with the puppy. I was a secondary handler, and then I transitioned into his primary handler. So when I went for the position, and I was helping with like the community outreach aspect of it. So usually you get a year, but I got about a 3-month crash course in it. And so that's the challenging part of comfort dog handling or therapy dog, because we don't have like the academy or the training that the tactical canines do. We don't have that structuredness. So for me, it was bringing him, I think the first thing we did was the Pride Parade. So just navigating him through the crowd, learning to keep an eye on him, where he's supposed to walk, like he walks on the left side, like, introducing him, like one of the commands is like, say hello. And that lets him know that that person's safe for him to go say hi to, because you just don't want him running up to just anybody. And we did have somebody like under arrest at the station one time, but I thought it was the cutest thing because he was trying to go say hi and he couldn't find their hands because they were behind their back, but he doesn't discriminate, right? So it's just like, oh, hey, buddy, like,
not right, you.
Yeah, not right now, like, let's let them get processed, and then if they're behaving on the way out, then we could do that, but I love the fact that, so things like that. Again, debriefings, like we had to do a debriefing for another agency for an infant death. There's a lot of things that he's gonna do that people will never see or hear about that are traumatic, so and then we went through AKC. So he has his AKC, so a lot of behavioral training. So that's like the good citizen, canine good citizen, right, buddy? That's your sit stays. Like right now, like you can see that he's not, knock on wood, a barker, right? He's bark, like sometimes he'll make little noises. I call it talking, because that's, we communicate. But things like being able to go out to eat and something falls on the floor, he's not gonna run and eat it. He's not afraid of cars, loud sounds, crowds, like all these things that he has to be tested in. So, and then we just do that every day. So sometimes when I came home with crutches, he backed away from me, and I went, oh boy, so he doesn't like crutches. So what are we gonna do? So we have to work through that, because what if I bring him to the hospital? I can't have him afraid of crutches. So I took all of his toys and piled them on the crutches, because whenever somebody would come to visit, first he barks at the door, and then he sees that they're safe, and then he gets them a toy. So that's whenever he sees somebody he knows, he wants to get a toy for them. So he had to work through his fear to get toys. So now he doesn't care about crutches.
Has he brought you a crutch yet?
No.
Right?
We brought the crutches to Hero Pups and said, hey, he didn't like crutches. And they're like, oh, okay, because they train them with walkers and wheelchairs. So we're helping the next generation, right? So I'm like, we donated our crutches. So yeah, but other than that, he's pretty intuitive. Like if somebody, I don't teach him, I don't do fake things with him. So if somebody's really crying, if somebody's really emotional, if somebody's really upset, he can sense that, and he'll figure out if he wants to go and push his face through their hands and whatnot. So very good boy. But a lot of that is our bond, our trust, that he knows it's okay for him to do those things. Yeah.
So what is it about Portsmouth that has gained and held on to your trust to make you, like, originally, what was it that made you stay in the community that you grew up in to help service it better, and what keeps you here?
Gosh, so I think Portsmouth was so different back then, and now when you look at
change.
Well, and I don't think there's too many terrible parts of Portsmouth that you can look at and go, oh, I would not want to live there. And back then, growing up in Mariners Village, like that was considered one of the worst low income places in Portsmouth. And growing up, like my parents got divorced when I was 3. We're biracial. My dad is African American, my mom's white. And back then that was in the 70s and things like that. It wasn't necessarily like super common around here, but more so with the base being open and the Navy Yard, and working and things like that. But they got divorced when I was 3, and then we had our first stepdad from 3 to 14, and he practically raised me, and he had gotten laid off from his jobs, and one day he came home and told us that he was an alcoholic and he was going away to rehab for a month, and then he completely abandoned us. Like, we never heard from him. He wiped out my mom's bank account. Like, she had to get 4 jobs. My sister, I have an older sibling who's 4 years older than me, and she's awesome. She works for Dana-Farber. She ended up getting a degree in computer science and so on. But that was really difficult then, to be like abandoned, and then that's when I started getting into trouble and just not really caring, and that was something that we were kind of embarrassed about, and back then wasn't super common, and didn't really know how to talk to people about that. And so in school, like, we had high honors, we were pretty gifted, and and I just started getting into like a lot of fights, and and just being kind of a crappy kid, so anyway, I got into a fight one night downtown, and I almost got arrested. I had moved out halfway through senior year, and run out, kick out, whatever you want to say. But again, just like considered a behavioral problem. And I met these officers, and they ended up not arresting me because of fight, and which was great. They picked me up on my birthday. They're like, "You're the boxer we heard about." And once I knew one of the cops, I knew them all. And I saw good cops and I saw bad cops, and I always had a thing about injustice anyway, but they really started paying attention to me and just kind of being like, "What are you doing with yourself? Like, you're smarter than that, you're better than that," type of thing. And I ended up talking to my biological dad and going into the military for military police. And then it was a lower enlistment time, less enlistment, to be a corrections officer. So I ended up being a prison guard at Leavenworth. And if anybody told me what that was going to be like before I went in, I would have been like, screw this. But I worked, like, I was 19 years old working with death sentence inmates, and it was pretty wild. And then coming out of it, I came home and I worked at the county jail for 3 years. I really wanted to come back to Portsmouth because, like, I waited tables. I had like 4 jobs before I became a cop, but I was like waiting tables at Cafe Espresso, waiting tables at Bugaboo Creek. I was working at the Chase Home for Children as a residential counselor. I was putting myself through college at Hester College, and I was in the National Guard. I didn't have the best discharge from the military. I always still kind of had a problem with, not necessarily authority, but I don't really care what your position or rank is. If you're not a good person, I'm gonna have a problem with that. Like, if you're not doing the right thing, I'm gonna have an issue with that, so you have to learn how to conform to a certain point, so that you can get where you want to be able to help other people. So all those people in the community helped me and didn't give up on me when I needed places to crash. And there was one point where I was sleeping out of my car working at the truck stop in the night shift. It's just like all these things that people sort of sometimes like hear about you, but things that you feel shameful about, or that you're not in a good place, and throughout the years you realize that these certain things happen to you, and you can either have a chip on your shoulder about it and be resentful, towards society, or you can understand that things happen for a reason, and maybe this is going to make you better at understanding and helping somebody else. So the long and short of it is just like, my community has always been there for me, and I would not want to do this job anywhere else. It just wouldn't be as meaningful. So if I can give back, like, that's what you do.
Do you remember the 2 cops who didn't
arrest
you?
Yeah.
Did you get to work with them?
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, one of them. So
yeah.
Tom Grella was one of them, and he was great. He looked like Tom Cruise. He was like, and I was like, let me see my Miranda rights, and she was fine. She was fine. She was older than me. It was just, it was just one of those kid things. We used to hang out at Market Square, and I did never put bubbles in the fountain. That was not my thing. But we would go to the bagel place. There used to be the old bagel place where Fat Belly's was, and now it's like a store. And they would throw out bagels at night. We'd all get the bagels, and we'd like throw them at each other, like a snowball fight. And then the birds would eat them by the morning, right? Like, yeah. So my bagel hit the water, got water on this girl's pants. She got mad about it. We had to have a conversation that ended in a physical way.
Yeah.
Which I always tell the kids, this is not the way nowadays. You cannot get away with that nowadays.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Learn from my mistakes.
Oh yeah.
So
even more so now. Like, yeah.
Yep, but and then that officer too, one of them, he used to write to me in basic training and just be supportive throughout, like, my basic training and everything. So I was like, yeah, really full circle. So so I hope that I get to be that, or I have been that.
That was the next question. Is that, like, have you found that, like, I'm sure you talk to thousands of kids all day long, every day, every week.
Yeah.
Or have you found the kids who are coming up to you after saying, like, how can I become a police officer?
Yeah, so
What can
I
do
actually
now?
brought like these cute recruitment cards we just ended up doing, and they're shaped like badges. They have the QR
Nice.
code and everything, so it cuts down on trying to have that conversation and email me and all this stuff. And it's just like, hey, and then I thought it was like funny because you can kind of hold it up to you and it looks like you're got a little badge on, so. And I think too, like a lot of people think I could never do that because, I got in trouble or something like that. So working with, like students from the Lister Academy and saying like, come here, buddy. Good patience. Can you sit? Good boy. You know, down?
Here's more people out there is probably
Oh, yeah.
wants to go and
He wants to do his job.
Yeah.
He wants to go say hi and why are we not walking around and why is mom talking to everybody again? And she said we weren't going to be that long. Yeah. He's super sweet. Absolutely. So I'll say come in for a tour. I'll get you on a ride along, like, because we want like diversity. Like you want that. You don't want everybody that, somebody that's never been in trouble. I don't think I would, have been in trouble as, that's a whatever term, but
I think any position that you go into, you want to see the other side of it first anyway.
Right.
To see what impact it has. Like, I mean, I've been eating for 50 years, but really didn't start cooking professionally until like 3-4 years ago, and I've seen it from both sides.
Yeah, which changes the game, right?
Completely.
And then how are you relevant? And I think we have to do better at marketing that as law enforcement because look, you can be a comfort dog. Like these positions that my position never existed. It didn't exist until interim chief came around and said, hey, I want to make this a full-time community outreach position. Like it was never here. So the fact that you can be creative and make trading cards and these badge, all these things in law enforcement that it's just so versatile now, and we need to market some of those things where people can use their creativity for like social media, and there's more to it than just guns and arrests, and obviously like there is that component, which is number one, you are putting you have to always be able to go back and work patrol. Like right now I'm on late duty, right? And that's why, because even though maybe I'm not on the street as much anymore, I have to still be able to do all the duties that a patrol officer does as long as I am a full-time police officer. And there's always that risk. And I think like, again, like what happened the other day on the bridge, just reminds people that it does happen here. And that's why
it happens everywhere. Like,
exactly.
That's the amazing thing is that like, and I was saying to Dan beforehand, I was like, I go to work, I make food, I put food in bellies, people are happy. You go to work, people are alive, or like the outcome of people's next steps in their lives are going to be hinged on you doing your job,
right?
Which I am fascinated and amazed at every day, that you're able to wake up and leave the house. I mean, currently not now, but the fact that you're able to
leave the house,
leave your house and go do a job that other people don't necessarily appreciate as much as they should.
Right, and I think and that too is you have to remember that you're seeing like 10% of the population in crisis a lot of times. Like we're a crisis intervention team trainer, we go with NAMI, we're partnered on their faculty to go and teach other officers how to intervene with people in crisis. And crisis looks different for everybody. So a lot of it too is like putting your ego aside, putting yourself in somebody's shoes, or just like active listening and hearing them, and not we have a tendency as humans to like immediately start to relate it to our own experiences, and you just have to be careful about that because you're really not validating that other person. And for me, when I say it's personal, like I've been to unattended deaths where it's somebody that I knew or grew up with that was had an addiction to drugs or something like that. If that doesn't motivate you to want to go out and prevent something like that from happening when you do have that personal connection, that's what this job is about as well. And and even working from home and just documenting some narratives the other night, it's like there was a reported sexual assault that I was working on, there was a domestic assault that you're working on of a 60-year-old woman who's been in this horrible relationship for 10 years, and during those conversations and those interviews, reminding them like, hey, this really is not your fault. There's nothing that you did to bring this on yourself. This is not how relationships are supposed to be, and I'm so sorry that for age 60, like that you're still experiencing something like this, and just, I'm proud of our training, I'm proud of the support from, our department and our chief to even think of like having, wellness programs and our ranking officer stuff, to recognize that we need that too as officers so that we can go out. We have to fill our cup so that we can go out and be that. You have to be so many things to so many individuals, right? Like think about your radio shows or even as a cook. How many people are like, oh, I don't want salt in that, or I'm gluten free, right? It's like, do you use garlic? Oh my God, in the restaurant business, right? And everybody, you're servicing a variety of people, and you're trying to like
And at the same time,
please them all.
Yes.
You have to set a part of yourself aside
Right.
in order to fulfill that because of the role.
Yeah, and last night, like in my head, I'm going, whoa, this is heavy. Like, okay, am I good? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm good. Why am I good? I'm like, all right, because I did A, B, and C. All right, good. You know, so you have to like self-check as well. And then it's, you know, and some of it too is, I don't think anything ever, you know, if you do get complacent, if it doesn't bother you, if you're not emotional about it, you know, if you don't go through those things throughout the day, then are you really doing what you're passionate about? And should you?
Because if you don't question it, then why are you doing it
Right.
in the first place?
And when it's the people business and your coworkers rely on you and the community relies on you, then that's another avenue where you really have to be like, should I be doing this or not? Because that is detrimental, you know, to people's health and life, and you know, there's a ripple effect. So if I come out and I have a bad day and I treat somebody disrespectfully, then now that's what they're going to think about all of us. And that's always been my biggest challenge. Is when I grew up, I was never in a clique. I was always my own path. And then sometimes when you're roped into like you cops or the police, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's my group, right? Like I forget that, but I'm also an individual member, and I think we're getting much better about that as a society too, going, okay, yes, there's still people, you know, like a show like this is a perfect opportunity. So thank you very much for
because you
that.
get to show who you are, not necessarily the company that you represent.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, I'm a total nerd, man. I know my friends are mad at me because I was sending memes and reels like to like 2 in the morning. I'm like, we got to get up and do this radio show. But I love, like, I'm a Marvel superhero, Wonder Woman, everything.
Well, you actually
prefer
Wonder Woman,
dragons
dragons are real.
And you also sold me. Now I'm gonna watch Love Off the Grid because I need another show to sink my teeth into.
If you ever felt like you wanted to run away and be away from people, it's like, nope. And what is going on here? These people are, you know, I don't know. I'm like, we're nice dating pool people, that's for sure. Because some of these people are just, I'm like, wow, you really gotta compromise. You know?
Yeah.
And I really love running water. You know, I'm very thankful that I can afford to live like rent in Portsmouth. Sometimes like I'm just like doing my dishes and I'm like, oh my god, they would just have like one bucket and that's $500. It's like
my dad loved asking people about their family tree and then following up with the comment about having indoor plumbing.
How many limbs are on that?
Thankfully, there's indoor plumbing here at the radio station, which we have to take a break for to make sure that we have the running water. WSCA 106.1 FM. This is Portsmouth Community Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Is this for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
So don't go anywhere.
Sorry, I talk fast. You guys are fun.
We try.
What restaurant are you at?
Well, now I'm at the Blue Mermaid, but you did a security training
at the press room?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yep. Yeah, those are my favorites too.
That, and it's funny because part of the questioning that I wanted to follow up with is you basically, your job almost is to train people so that they don't need to see you. And that's what I'm finding. Again, Dan used to do that for years, trying to train people to do media stuff so that they wouldn't need him. It's like you're training, you're almost out there training people for you to be obsolete.
I want to talk about, we'll talk about that, mental health in the community, and
Good boy.
And we're back here. Around the Square is a weekly talk show on WSEA Portsmouth Community Radio, hosted by Dan Freund. I'm Phil, the engineer and kind of co-host, and we're here today with.
Would you go with producer?
Prengineer? How about
Prengineer.
that? I'll take that.
Hitter of the record button.
I sometimes hit the record button. I sometimes miss it. And we are here with Rochelle Jones and her partner Mason, the Comfort Dog.
Okay.
So the question I wanted to ask is, I experienced a training when I was a security person at the press room, and you basically train security people so that they don't need to call the police. So you're almost like training people so that you're obsolete in their lives. How does that feel in a way? I feel like I want to know the person behind that. There's a question there somewhere.
Yeah, no, so it started, actually, this is funny because 6 years ago I tore my ACL and meniscus on my left knee. So it was the first time that I had to be on light duty as a police officer, which means that you're not allowed to wear your duty belt or anything with a badge or carry your gun, right? And so at the time they were implementing like civilian response to active shooter events training, which is called craze.
Oh yeah, that sounds like it would be a craze.
Right, right. And so you have to go through this course, and then you go out to the community and you train, right? Because there was events that were happening all over, and so that was very surreal for me because I'm teaching people like, hey, you don't have weapons, and here's what you do. And actually, I have to believe in what I'm teaching you right now because I don't have the ability to protect myself with the weapon too. But from those trainings, because those are really like, hey, blank is hitting the fan, here's what you do. We're not negotiating with these people, you know, we're just keeping ourselves safe. But what the community started asking for was, you know, what do you do beforehand? You know, how do you recognize somebody that's, you know, a difficult person? Like, what do you do if somebody's having a mental health crisis? And so I went back and developed like our own, you know, obviously from training and experience and research, our own trainings, right? And what to do before the police come, because part of that too came from a retail presentation that we did for shop owners downtown, because one of the patrol officers came to me, and this was part of the community outreach job, and said, you know, people are calling in like robberies when it's shoplifting, and they're getting frustrated because we're showing up to the shops and we're not taking people out in handcuffs, so they don't understand what our position is. And so I was like, all right, go get me business cards of everybody downtown, get them to me, and I'll send out an email. What I learned early on was, don't just try to teach people what you think they want, that you want them to know. So we had a meeting, and I said, tell me everything that you want to learn from the police, and then I will incorporate what we want you to learn from us, and then we will have like an event. So I invited all those retailers to the police department, did a presentation on things like counterfeit money, what shoplifting looks like. Like, we're not going to come and take somebody in handcuffs for shoplifting if we know that they're local. There's certain like guidelines in the criminal law that tells us when we can and can't make an arrest, right? But if your expectation is, all right, I just called the police, they're going to come take this person away, and then they don't, you know, then there's like, you feel like there's a failure there. Like, why didn't you do that? And they just get to walk away. So you're not getting like that gratification, right? And so it was having those explanations. So teaching people also, like, what do you do when you call? Dispatch is going to ask you a bunch of questions. You know, like, I don't know. I didn't know what color shirt. I didn't know which direction they went in. And of course, we want as much information as possible responding to something, because we want to be as safe as possible and as effective as possible. So it's really just that communication and making people aware. Like, so we do personal safety awareness. I do self-defense classes. I do one for high school students. That came from a parent that attended a self-defense class and said, my daughter's going into college. 1 in 4 students are sexually assaulted, females, you know, like, I want to make sure she's safe. Can you develop something for high school students? And we met with the school and said, here's, you know, we talk about how to handle those uncomfortable situations, what to do, what the law is, you know, basically like, this is not okay. You know, if you had to break it down, it's like, this is not okay for people to behave this way, you know, and because I think we get really desensitized, especially in public service or restaurants or churches where we want to be welcoming, libraries, and we want to be helpful, but then somebody's behavior is not like the other, right? And then at which point are we stopping to accommodate this bad behavior and kind of punishing everybody that's doing what they're supposed to be doing? And at which point do we need to put our boundary in place? You know, I'd rather be called the bad name, you know, because I'm like, hey, I'm all done with that. You know, you need to go away verbally. And a lot of it comes right back down to like when you're a kid. And a lot of times I ask people, I go, what did you tell children if somebody tried to kidnap them? You know, kick, scream, yell, you know, run and tell somebody that you trust. All those things really are like basically like an adult. You're using your words, like if you have to get physical, then you do, and there's no other avenue, right? And then you're going and telling somebody, always reporting it, you know, to the police or somebody that you trust. And we actually do things like cops and kids events with kids. So we're having these conversations with everything from like preschool to middle school, high school, and grown-ups. So now when you have kids that were at the high school, they know ALICE training, which is alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. There's all different acronyms, but still it's run, hide, fight, right? They are having this, and then when I see them at like a job or something going, I'm like, hey, I asked, did anybody have these trainings in school? Yes, they did, right? So sometimes it might be the child that turns to a parent at a concert, right? Where something like it doesn't always have to be a shooting event, right? It could be like a fire or something, and go, hey, we need to run, we need to go this way. Like, I learned that in school, Mom, you know, because as adults, a lot of times we project our fears onto the kids, and that's always the big conversation. How do I talk to the children?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you let them dictate.
But also how the children talk to the parents, and that's what's crucial about you know, public servants going to the schools to educate the children, as well as teachers, Teachers can only do so much.
We did a fun one at the Catholic school, so St. Pat's, they wanted to, say, and sometimes people are like, we don't want you saying the bad words like guns, or, it's like, okay, I'll accommodate, because if we get in there and have a positive interaction, that's a win. Like, I understand that there has to be that compromise, So what we did was, because they're religious based, there's a book, and these were like little ones, but, there's the shepherd, the sheep, and the wolf, right? Like, so the shepherds help the sheep get out, and the wolf, the big bad wolf, right? Because how do you explain a dangerous person? What does that look like to a child, right? Like, and so a lot of times we do use weapons, like say the word gun, if somebody has a gun or something dangerous, because you're concentrating on the object. Because you do hear stories about like a 6-year-old taking a gun to school. Is a child going to recognize their friend as a dangerous person? But if they see that object, right? So anyway, at the school, I was like, you know what, let's get creative with this. So we got our police officers to wear like these little wolf ears, wolf tail, wolf paws. We had the teachers with the staffs as the shepherds. As the shepherds, and then we had some of the little kids be the lambs, and so we acted out like what to do if something happened. So that way it was fun, but they learned. And here are these big scary police officers with like dressed up
for ears.
Yeah, So I'm like, let's do it. And the officers were awesome because they were absolutely down with that. And and again, like now we have something new that we do. And when we talk to the older, kids, like, I just ask them, I let them dictate and say, what would you do if something happened? What have you already learned? Not everybody's from here either. So sometimes it may not, good boy, it may not be like a Portsmouth thing, but what if you're in, you travel, you're overseas, like, you're in Israel, like, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like, you can use these skills anywhere.
Keeping your awareness up is important. Learning about boundaries too, that was something that I didn't really learn until late,
right?
For me, and just knowing how to, at what point you're not going to accept behavior in advance.
Right.
That's how I think people get caught in situations, is that they keep eroding those boundaries and accepting. And then they
that's grooming. There's a grooming process, and I like to think that sometimes I give somebody a warning and say, hey, like, I don't like your behavior, you stop it, right? Like, and then if they continue, now it's being done on purpose. Because I feel like some people maybe are ignorant to that, even though you're not, right? But I think when we do these trainings, one of the most important thing is affirmation and permission. For people to go, and there's never been a time that we've had those conversations that anybody's been like, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I usually say, if your manager in your business has me here telling you, we've gone over what this training is going to be about, that is them supporting you and saying that if you have to put up some sort of boundary, that they're going to support you in that boundary. And some people are not comfortable, it's people's comfort zone in their personal training. My comfort zone may be a little bit different, than somebody else, but somebody that's not comfortable confronting somebody, then maybe just have another person come stand next to you. People will behave better, when they're like all of a sudden like, oh, why are they here? Oh, they're just here for me, like, I need help with this.
Yeah.
And we are in such a overly communicative, overly sharing society now that people can advocate for themselves because of trainings like what you're doing. You're going out saying it's okay to say these things if you feel uncomfortable.
Right, and giving them
anybody.
And giving them an out too, right? Because it's like,
and the tools to be able to get out of a situation that they don't want to be in, and that's huge. That's the biggest present you can give to anybody, is the ability to leave a situation.
And I think one of the hardest things too is the reality and saying, something that each time you do a training you think about, how to do it better, or somebody might bring up a point. And especially, I know these are heavy topics, but sometimes talking about the sexual assault awareness, like, I get very frustrating that, why are there not more classes for bad behavior people until they get arrested? Like, a lot of times we don't know that they're bad behavior people until they get arrested. Why is it always on the potential victim, or, us to always be aware, to always be on alert? Like, who is saying, hey, stop doing that? And, but also there are going to be times where somebody cannot remove themselves from a situation, and they may have to endure something horrible to survive. And I always make sure I point that out and say that is okay. Your job is to, I know, but I'm talking about heavy stuff. It's like, Mama's getting emotional. But, it is, nobody should be Monday quarterbacking you about why you did or didn't do something if you felt like what you did was your best avenue. And escaping can literally be surviving something, horrific until you can be safe to get away, because these real life things are happening where people are, being harmed by their loved ones, almost all of these situations like are starting in domestic violence situations, right? And how do you wrap your head around that? And that's what I talk to students at the high school about. I go, 90% is somebody that 90% of pedophiles, like child abuse, domestic, any type of violence, it evolves. It doesn't just happen, right? So how are you wrapping your mind around the fact that I know this person and they're doing this to me? It's very easy to have your guard up with a stranger.
There might be some love.
Exactly, right? And that's all you know. So if that's all you know, like that's your experience.
Well,
then...
I think also the fact that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
The more and more we talk about it, the more and more the people who are, I don't want to say making the bad behaviors and inflicting their damage onto other people, because everybody is a victim of an outbreak that may be inflicted upon somebody else. So whether it's premeditated or not, we're training people now to recognize the bad behaviors in themselves first.
Right.
Because if you understand that you victimized somebody, and have the compassion enough in your brain to understand that what you've done hurts somebody, then you won't do it again.
And that's the social emotional learning. So there's like the Choose Love movement is one of them, and that's Charlotte Lewis from Jesse Lewis from the Sandy Hook. They go around and that's approved by the governor. So with kids, and when we did a Respect Week at the high school class for sophomores, and one of the things was, all right, if we're going to talk about dating violence and domestic violence, come here, buddy. Come here. If we're going to talk about those things, then we need to talk about what a healthy relationship looks like, right? If you're going to say don't do this, then let's show them. So there was these great videos of like teenagers talking about what they thought a healthy relationship looked like for them. And also being able to find some role models, right? If you're coming from a household where that's how your parents behaved and were abusive to each other, then you need to find some role models outside of that house, even if it's like a television show where you're like, I love that couple. Like,
well, that's why we were just talking about it. Why we watch train wrecks on TV, and so we can feel better about the train wrecks that are our own lives.
And then sometimes there's some really good communication. Like this one guy, I'm like, oh my gosh, like he just communicated amazing. I'm like, I'm gonna use that next time, right? Like, and I was like, this girl has no idea how great this person's communicating.
I wanna ask you about how this correlates with mental health in the community.
Yeah.
And how your role is impacting that in the community.
Right. So I think during COVID, there was not a lot of face-to-face, and so one of the reassignments for me was to follow up with mental health crises and reach out to people and check in with them, offer to try and get them some services and things like that. Right now we actually have an awesome social worker, Brooke Murphy. We have our first police social worker, so a lot of that role is with her.
A police officer who is a social worker.
No, she's not a police officer.
Oh.
She's a civilian social worker
cool.
at our police department.
That's
so those
great.
So we're
So wait, she helps the officers as well as the public, I assume.
She can,
right?
like if they want to come and talk to her, yeah. But we also have those wellness checks with a different therapist that once a year we're required to do. So it will go into those wellness checks, and then if an officer wants like further hey,
further therapy, we get them a therapy dog, which is Mason. She totally understands where now is Mason a he or a they or a, I don't know how to refer to the dog.
Oh, Mason?
Yes. Him.
Boy.
Yes, he.
Yeah. They actually can have the therapist will help them get sessions.
Oh,
like if they
right.
Need,
that's what I'm saying. Is that like
not with Mason, but with the with
a real therapy dog? And I don't
real therapist.
A real therapist.
Yeah. Okay. So if you go for a wellness check and there's these things that are coming up and it seems like I want to continue like an actual therapist like more regularly, then they'll help facilitate that for you too.
Yeah, because I can imagine the weight that is carried on your soul because of the job that you do.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I know you do a lot of things to decompress, but is therapy one of them? And are there any people in the community you'd like to give shout outs to that maybe you like? Bruce, like anytime I go see Bruce, he's got a pat on the back, a handshake, and always an awesome snarky comment that'll work perfectly for my mood.
Yeah.
Whether I'm happy, sad, angry, he'll just be like, oh, blah, 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 and I'll be all set.
Yeah. There's so many people. So he's passed away now, but Pastor Reverend Hilson, he was a huge mentor for me and just always too blessed to complain, and then there was times where I maybe felt low in the career and just like, I don't know if I'm still doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, you just always have those moments, am I on the right path? And, he would just tell me like, we rise, you know what I mean? And always put me back on. I think for me, my therapy really is service to others. Like I don't, being open and honest, like I don't have a therapist. I've not been to therapy. I'll go to the wellness checks and things like that. But also, you know, I think it's great, you know, and I also think that there's some people that it's not something that I feel like I need now. You know, maybe someday that might be something, but I think that's okay. Like, I think I feel appropriately for certain situations. I learned how to work through it. I haven't had something that's hindered my ability to function, you know, and so that's just how I operate. But again, it's service to others is what makes me feel better about certain things that happen. Like you asked about like the mental health and the impact. I think, you know, helping to talk to other officers about, you know, just responding to people in crisis. Like I had an opportunity to help negotiate and talk a gentleman off the bridge like in 2022. And, you know, it's really about learning how to connect with people. And I'll kind of joke when I'm talking to officers, I'm like, hey, like you just got to learn how to, you know, everybody can connect to everybody. Like, oh, you like air? I love breathing. Like, you know, but, you know, the things that we connected on initially with that gentleman was like things like music and certain artists and, you know, and then it was finding out a lot of things that just were not going good for him, you know, and it's a lot. Like, you know, I consider myself pretty well functioning, but man, you know, it's even not saying that other people aren't well functioning, but it's the prices are going up. Like being able to like budget and
it's a lot of stress.
It's just a lot of stress, and a relationship goes down, you know, and a breakup, you know, it's just like all these things, you know, for people, or a job doesn't go through, and you do have mental health challenges, and you're not able, people don't, because you can't see it, they can't understand why something might be hard for somebody because you can't see it, you know, so you don't know what their challenges are, and you just need to be, you know, compassionate about it. As long as that person's being safe to themselves and to somebody else, like, you know, it's okay. I talked to a lot of people that, you know, have been diagnosed with some form of schizophrenia or paranoia, and, you know, what I tell people is that there's always some truth to the conversation, you know, and I always pay attention because a lot of times we'll come back to certain things, and if you haven't been paying attention, like they're gonna know. It doesn't mean that they're not intelligent because maybe they're seeing something that you don't see.
Yeah,
you know?
I had a friend who was manic depressive,
Right.
and when he was in an episode, I took it upon myself to subscribe to it. I was in with him.
Yeah.
I was the rational thinking person who was listening to him.
Right.
And in that moment, he trusted me enough.
Yes.
And I'm more so like, when you're going up to the bridge, how do you block out all the mayhem to just connect with the person?
Oh, that was tough.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
and I'm sure you.
Well, actually, my partner at the time, we kind of had a disagree. This is like the realistic life, you know, and I talk about it, the story in its entirety to the officers, you know, and I'm like, oh, going up there, you know, it's like we had resolved our disagreement the night before, but if we hadn't, and I hadn't been in good form, I talk about interacting with people in crisis almost the same as giving CPR. You know, if you're not capable, like, don't do it, right? Because once you do it, you're in it, and until like somebody more experienced comes along to take over for you, like, be prepared for the long haul. Like, who knows how long you're going to be in a conversation. I'm on the crisis hostage negotiator team for our emergency response team as well, and we just did like a challenge, you know, it was a mock scenario, but it went for 7.5 hours, right, straight, like very realistic. And then they were on one, we were on light duty, but they were on one, you know, where it went for 8 hours, you know what I mean? So it's like, you're gonna be in it. That's a commitment to somebody. Going on the way up, like, you know, I always used to joke, like, oh, someday they're gonna be like, I want Rochelle, you know, like my little hero call out, you know, and now I'm like, never again, you know, but
did he ask for you by name?
he was looking for an officer that he could relate to, with some of the characteristics that he had. So they kind of put it out like, hey, would you go and, you know, it wasn't necessarily like, hey, you're a negotiator, go up there. There was negotiators already up there, and I found out when I got up there. But it was like, and also looking to speak to somebody from Portsmouth. So we were doing oral boards at the time, like for new officers. I think I just talked to the candidate about, you know, community outreach and stuff like that, and how to treat people, or, you know, treat them the way you'd want to be treated or something like that. And then just went up, and I had been through the, come here, buddy, come here. Somebody's feeling left out. So I've been through, like, you have to actually be primary is what it's called, with the subject. Like, you have to go through the FBI school, and I hadn't been through that school yet, but we had just gotten back from a conference, and there was a doctor up there that was talking about, if you're ever talking to somebody on a bridge, like, make sure you have somebody hold on to you, because sympathetically, like, you might try and jump. But this individual, he wasn't up on the bridge where we could pull him down. He was actually on the catwalk, so he had to be talked up. So for me to shut everything out, you know, I called my significant other at the time and just said, hey, I'm going up here. This is what the whole backup of traffic is about. Like, you know, I love you. And then to, you know, I called my team leader from the negotiator team and just said, hey, like, this isn't a call out, but like, I want my team. Like, I don't want to be up there. He ended up coming up there actually. So that was great because usually on a team, like you have a coach, you have a primary that talks to the person. You know, you have like somebody that's scribing, you have intel coming in, like you have a whole team of people, you know, and I'm trying to figure it out. Very rarely is it face to face with very little information. So I was starting from scratch with this person with like just a first name really and a couple things that he did not like, and then we just, you know, worked through it. So we were able to connect on, like, I saw that he was like smoking cigarettes, and that was like at the point where I had somebody hold on to my belt, you know, and I guess been kind of throwing him down. Like, he wasn't happy when I got there. Like, you think like, hey, I'm here, you know, and he's like, ah, you know, because he's in crisis. And, you know, and so I was just like, hey, I see, you know, you're smoking a cigarette, you know, you want a cigarette? And he's like, yeah. And this was the pivotal moment because I had said, you know, I want to try and hand it to him and see how he takes it from me. That's going to tell me, you know, where he's at. Like, if he tries to take me with him, then he's not ready to come up. You know, if he takes it kind of like softly or something, then maybe we're getting somewhere. And, you know, we were pretty close to each other. He was actually able to take it out of my hand softly. And, you know, we looked each other right in the eyes. And I think, like, at that point, like, you're not seeing the uniform, like, you're seeing, you know, you're seeing humanity. And we actually were able to connect on people in the community. Like, you know, he had some demands, but he did end up knowing like Pastor Hilson, and so I was talking about community members that we had in common. I didn't know him. It was like the one time I probably went somewhere I didn't know somebody, you know, and then, you know, I had to build trust quickly, and, you know, and the other negotiators up there, they've been up there for hours with them, so I have to explain to people. I got a lot of publicity about that, which I didn't mind in the sense of it was a very positive thing that is related to police. It showed that it was able to open up that conversation about the additional training that we get. Like, don't be afraid every time we go to a call that we're going to shoot somebody, right? Like, we are trained to try and have these conversations with people, right? And a lot of times they are successful and nobody will ever hear about them. They're happening at 2 a.m. They're, you know, and it's patrol officers, not just negotiators, you know, but I talk to them, it's like a closer in a baseball game, right? This team is working the whole game the whole time. You come in and throw like 3 strikes, right? So I didn't, you know, it's a
set
team
it up
effort.
for you, and
exactly.
you kind of just teed off.
It's a team effort, you know, so, and then after the fact, like, it's not just like, hey, we get this person up off the bridge. It's also like, you know, having trust with them, like, I'm going to bring you to the hospital. I'm going to make sure that nobody jumps you when you come up here, if that's your fear. Like, we're not going to do that, right? Other officers, you know, and I'm going to stay in touch with you while you're getting help that you need. And, you know, so, and that's what we did. So, you know, but a lot of it is just going, okay, I have to be ready to engage with this person. If I'm not, I have to be honest with myself. And
so you had to be, so if you got the call and you hadn't rectified the problems between your partner at the time, would you have said yes to the call?
Yeah,
or
I'm not
would
sure.
You have tapped out?
I think you know, if I didn't feel like I was good, like if I felt like, hey, I didn't feel well or I got some sleep, if there's anybody else that can, you know, I would totally step back. Like, those are times where you want to set your ego aside because there's way more going on here than about you, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if I'm not the best person at the time, I'm not the best person at the time. But I think one of the things that I always call it for myself, and that's even when I'm doing like a victim interview or something, because we get so harped on time, right? Everything's like time limit, like we're looking at the clock right now, how much time do we have, like we're going over time, is surrendering to the time and saying it's going to take what it takes. And I have to tell myself that it could take 20 minutes, it could take, you know, you're such a good boy, because I know you probably have to go out. It's going to take what it takes, and then just really surrendering to that, and telling other people that, like, hey, we got to get him up here now. It's like, well, I'm going to talk to him and see how it goes, and you do what you need to do in the background. I can't feel that pressure. He's going to feel it, you know. So that's the hardest part, is just opening yourself up for that, and opening yourself up to really active listening to somebody, not thinking about what you're going to say next to them, hearing them, not trying to find solutions for all their problems, but you're helping them to try and find some hope, and maybe just a little bit of resolution until we can get to the professionals, because you're not going to solve what's happened to somebody over the last 35 years in a conversation on the bridge, right? But if you can give them hope that things can get better and that you can work on it together and you can help find them some support, then, you know, a lot of times that's just kind of a beautiful thing, right?
And then the follow through and actually
You have to keep
Doing
your
it.
word. You have to be
Yeah.
impeccable with your word with people. That's your reputation. I was taught that a long time ago. I always say I was raised right in law enforcement. I'm taught to answer the phone like, how can I help? Like, every time. And if you don't really, feel up to it, then you probably shouldn't come to work that day, because if your mind's not in it, it's hard. Like, especially harder. I'm in a really good position right now, and our patrol officers, sometimes they're not. Like, there's a lot of understaffing everywhere. There's order-ins all the time. Like, so it's like, you think about, you're working a 10-hour shift, thinking you're gonna get off that shift, and you're this junior person, and now you're ordered over for another 5 or 10 hours, and you're not seeing your family, and you're not going home, and you're tired, and there's nobody else. Like, that makes, it being exposed to everything all over again. Like, some people don't understand that or have that at their jobs, and that's okay. It is what you chose as well, but you don't get to choose when it happens to you, and that's where you have to relinquish your circle of control and just do the best you can and ask for help. We have to know how to ask for help when we need it as well.
And this is where we ask for help by closing the show. Rochelle, you've been an amazing
Thank
guest.
you so
You're
much.
invited
Thank you.
back.
You guys
We're
are
more
awesome.
than happy to have you and Mason back whenever.
Mason, you got your voice on there, buddy.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah. And Dan?
So thank you again for joining us here on the show, and for all you listening out there, keep your eyes open, because you never know when you're going to cross paths with Rochelle or anyone else. You never know who you'll see, meet, or hear
Well, you
when
guys
you're
are
hanging
the
out
best.
Round the square!
Thank you. You're the best. Thanks for doing this and getting everybody's,
Oh, yeah.
get people's personalities and stuff up there. Like,
That's the thing that some people just miss from